Hi everyone, I'm going to do a quick demo today on subtractive and a bit of additive tone in a drawing, in a charcoal chalk drawing. You could also use graphite powder as well. I'm going to do another demo about sort of drawing with graphite powder as well at a later date, but this is sort of the first approach. So it's looking at different ways of adding tone and subtracting tone, using charcoal, using layering, blending a chalk or a charcoal onto a surface and creating some sort of ground to work onto and to work into, and using an eraser to lift off some of the tone that you've added onto a surface, and obviously sort of chalks or charcoals, adding more into it and sort of layering it over time. So when you first sort of look at the kind of marks that you can create, have a little think about sort of how you're obviously putting regular sort of marks down onto the surface of what it is that you're doing. So whether or not it be sort of fairly regular sort of marks and lines in that sort of respect, whether or not it be you sort of creating a surface like this, whether or not you're subtracting, taking away the tone that you're putting onto the surface. Just have a little sort of play around with how you actually sort of approach that. If I can just sort of show you a little bit more closer up some of those different processes. What I generally do is start in a drawing, is cover a surface, blend it. I'm lucky, so I tend to use my hands, sort of create a surface to sort of work onto like this. And then what you can do is obviously almost sort of draw with the eraser. And then if you're adding chalks, you can obviously sort of add into certain areas, add different sort of marks, stippling. You get the idea, okay? Now what I'm going to do is just show you sort of a couple of Blue Peter moments that I've had in sort of how you can approach this and apply it to portraiture. So if you're looking at sort of anatomy, if you like, there's one I prepared earlier, putting that into effect. Yeah, so if you've got actual sort of marks, and this has got smudged over time, maybe sort of in here I'm going to sort of add more lines and marks. Now to put this into effect from a portrait, I thought I'd get one sort of started and just sort of show you how you can sort of work on this and develop a drawing. A bit closer. So as you're working, this has got some ink on it as well. And what you can do is really sort of build up a surface. I'm quite messy in my work. It's not going to change that, unfortunately. But I tend to layer. Artists such as Frank Albach work in a similar sort of way with paint as well, and drawing. Giacometti as well. Is some of his sort of lovely sort of almost like wireframe drawings. But what I tend to do in a lot of my portraiture and a lot of my drawing is I'll create almost like a framework, a layering, a lattice of different marks that build up over time, and almost like contours on a map. I'm sort of trying to use some of the accidental marks upon a page to create a surface. And create a sort of 3D effect, if you like. So I'm looking at sort of the curves of where the cheekbones are, I'm looking at sort of where the eye sockets are, and sort of really trying to layer in. I might sort of want to take away certain sections, go into it. Now if you've got compressed charcoal, this is willow charcoal that I'm using here, but compressed charcoal has a much sort of thicker application. It's harder to rub away. I prefer using willow. And then later on, maybe if I'm adding tone, I'll sort of go into it with graphite or with some compressed charcoal. But what I tend to do sort of work into the different areas and sort of try and give tone as much as possible. Shadow, exaggerate some of these lights. So if you're working from a photograph, you've got loads of shadow in there, you're generally going to get a better result with what it is that you're doing. Now, if you're using different surfaces to sort of work up on, like some of these inks, you're not going to be able to rub away. Whilst if you just go solely with sort of chalks and charcoal, you are going to essentially be able to carve into what it is that you're doing. Now, one of the most difficult things as an artist is knowing when to stop. I still regularly struggle with this issue. It's knowing when to sort of step back from what it is that you're doing. Sometimes you'll call it wrong. You'll need to come back to it sort of 2 or 3 times. You might need to spray it, fix it. You get the idea, okay? So you can approach it in this sort of way, which is a more linear sort of way, messier sort of way, abstract sort of way, in what it is that you're doing, and create sort of quite terrifying, they tend to be, my drawings of faces, work. Now if you go for that sort of a more additive approach, if you go for more a subtractive approach, with this piece that I've started doing of the skull here, then you can be quite subtle with how you sort of rub away certain areas. I've fixed this previously, so I'm not going to get as much. But you can sort of see if you lift away in certain areas, you can add obviously highlights to certain parts, and then go back into it and add detail at a later date. And if you work into it sometimes with charcoal as well, you can get some really sort of nice effects with that. The key thing as well, it's one of the reasons I've chosen a skull to sort of show you today, is if you're thinking about how you're adding the marks and what it is that you're doing, with anatomy, you need to think a little bit about the structure. So like I was talking about just with that other drawing, the contours and stuff. You need to think a little bit about the eye sockets, the cheekbones, the ridges of the forehead, and the jaw. So try and sort of really think about that. It might be a good thing to sort of explore, especially at the start of your project, where you're looking at sort of the anatomy of the face, the structure of the face, the sort of the contours within it, and how you can certainly explore that and show that. And if you're then working up from a drawing, which is vital in terms of observation, you're looking at what's in front of you, all of this, these lines, these marks, and these tones are going to inform, if you are painting, how you're going to add, tone, the directions of brush strokes, the use of colour that you're going to use sometimes as well, will all sort of have a little bit of a say in what it is that you do and how you do it. Hope that's useful. A couple of little techniques for you. Ciao.